What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Nvidia stock, ticker symbol NVDA, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Wednesday, May 8th. Alright guys, Nvidia stock here today down $15.86 a share. That's minus 1.72% in regular trading hours. It's down another 3 points or so as of right now, at least in the after hours. Listen, wherever that price ends up in the after hours, you have to take note. Volume in the after hours is so low. Stocks are even big stocks are very easy to move in the after hours, so take that with a grain of salt. But let's take a look. We're going to pull out any bias that we can by looking under the hood at the volume profile. We're going to take a look at the psychological levels that, big smart money is going to be watching, so by default we need to as well. And then we'll finish out by looking at implied volatility, the expected move, and the directional bias coming out of the chain for tomorrow. Let's get started here on the 5-minute chart with that volume profile analysis. Listen, by the way, if you're new here, Nvidia is a daily upload. It hits daily at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. So my goal here is 10,000 subscribers. I know we can do it, but not without your help. So I appreciate you subscribing, and I will keep the daily Nvidia videos coming. Now let's take a look at this. Let's just see, because we have some big moves here. This fade, this slow, steady climb, this fade. I want to see if the volume profile gives us any more information on underlying bias. Okay, contextual open, we start to see volume fade. However, then it starts to pick back up again. We get a high volume bar on this bar here. Okay. Now, a lot of people would stop there and say, oh, look at that bearish bias. But do you notice anything about that bar? It has a giant wick on the bottom, which tells us that this here is a battle bar. The following bar as well has a large wick. This here is also somewhat of a battle bar. What's a battle bar? It's a bar that has a lot of buying and selling occurring at the same time. And those wicks on those candles tell us that that occurred. So that's truly not that strong of bias, because we're seeing a lot of volume pump occurring because we're getting so much buying and selling occurring on the same bar. So let's move on from there. You get pops, right? Single bar pop, again, a wick. Too much of a risk of fooled by randomness on one outlier regardless. Let's move on. Couple more single outlier pops. Nothing really there. We did get, if we look here, we got some consecutive green bars. Okay, looks like 7 consecutive green bars, but the volume is quite normal. All right, so the only thing that's slightly unusual about that is the amount of consecutive green bars, but the volume is not anything extraordinary as far as size. So moving forward, what we then see as we start to fade, kind of early afternoon, right, off that near the intraday high, not quite, but near the intraday high, we start to see volume increase, right? Kind of peak out here and then fade, but still while we're on kind of that second leg of this move, right? Move down, consolidate, second leg into that late day low, not the intraday low, but that late day low. Okay. So what's interesting about this is what you might expect to see is increasing volume that stays high throughout the entire downside move. And then as you come into that late day low, volume fades as the stock starts to bounce. We didn't see that really at all. We saw volume starting to increase on this first leg. And then as the consolidation kind of started to hit, those green bars had similar volume, not quite the same, but quite similar. And then volume randomly fades at the beginning of that second leg. Honestly, guys, I'm not comfortable assigning bearish bias here. It looks like there might be. But once we look deeper at what actually occurred, if it is there, it's very slight. So now heading into the end of the day, kind of a bizarre close actually. We didn't even see that increasing volume into the close, but what we did see is this big red bar after the close. That first 5-minute bar after the close. Don't let that freak you out if you're a bull. Don't let that be too exciting if you're a bear, because the truth is that's a rebalancing bar. Very little movement. Okay, a lot of volume coming in. A lot of different moves from algorithms, funds, institutions, just rebalancing at the end of the day. That bar is typically very high volume, and the movement is typically very low. So the color of the bar is basically just determined by, which small move did the bar end up making, because it's very rarely a large move unless we're seeing a catalyst. So that's really interesting because, what a lot of people, without looking deeper at this volume profile, we would assume, okay, it's nearly a minus 2% day, minus 1.7%. We're likely to see some bearish bias. And there was almost no bullish bias aside from these consecutive bars. But the bearish bias was not overwhelming at all. It was actually barely there. We had these two battle bars, okay, which a lot of both sides going on. We had this little increase. It starts to look like very slight bearish bias and then kind of proves itself wrong. If I'm bearish on Nvidia looking at this, I'm not thrilled about the volume profile today because it's not really supporting my bias, right? And if I'm a bull looking at this, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll take it because the worst thing I could see here is just massive bearish bias on an already red day. Okay, now let's move on here. Let's start taking a look at those self-fulfilling prophecy psychological levels starting with the 30-minute chart. Now you can see here today, guys, off the open, we gave up that 50 period, ending a little bit of a nice streak. We gave it up off the open, tried to reclaim it, and then gave it up a second time, and we're now below. Okay, so listen, tomorrow, bulls, couple of things. We are 3% away from a downside test of that 200 period, and we're about 1% away from an upside test of that 50 period. So listen, tomorrow, bulls, the backstop, at least looking specifically at the 30-minute, just ignore 900 right now. We'll talk about that on the daily chart, okay? Specific to the 30-minute now, we have to break each time frame down by themselves first. The backstop potentially is the 200 period. If we were to see a test of that, I want to see that hold as support. But the goal tomorrow, if you're a bull, is to break upside back above the 50 period on high volume, low volume retest, high volume bounce. Reclaiming that as short-term support. Bears, the backstop, if you want to see a test, or if we do see a test of that 50 period, you want to see that reject as resistance, okay? And the goal really, you bears have a little more room to go here, is to rip downside through the 200 period, low volume retest, high volume rejection, claiming the 200 period now, the lower level, as the short-term resistance, which would be good for you bears. Now, the 4-hour chart, if we take a look, you can see here, starting to come back into play a little bit more. As of the after hours, we're now about 2.7% away from that 200 period. If we were to see a downside test of that, again, we'll talk about 9 in a second here, but if we were to see a downside test of the 200 period, bulls, I want to see that hold as support. But really, bulls, ideally, I would like to hold off until we can get the 50 period crossing over, just so we can get an ascending level of support that ends up being a closer test to the stock price, okay? But I'll take what we can get. If we were to test that 200 period right away tomorrow, the 50 is likely to still be below there, so this would be the initial test first. I want to see that hold as support, whereas bears, your ultimate goal here is really to get beneath both of these, treating both of these as resistance, ideally in a descending pattern, which will take a little bit of time to form that. But that all starts, if you're a bear, with breaking downside beneath the 200 period. Now, the daily, guys. The daily is the most important chart, okay? If we take a look at the daily here. Now, listen, guys. This wick is likely to be a bit of a data error, a data glitch. Okay, that's a wick all the way down to 821. If you look here, the intraday low across all the other charts is somewhere around 890. Right, so let's go back to the daily. Just kind of ignore that wick, and we'll take a look at what's really going on here. The clear story on Nvidia on the daily, the one that everybody I think is paying the most attention to, is $900 a share. Okay, I saw someone commented as soon as the market was about to close. They were I forget exactly what they said, but they were excited that we held $900 a share all day, and I share that. Okay, I was watching that as well. Now, to be fair, we didn't actually hold it all day. We tested beneath there a number of times, but we held it into the close. Okay, it was ugly. It wasn't clean by any means, but the job was done. All right, it doesn't need to be clean if it gets done. So, the story tomorrow, because bulls, what have we been saying for a while? Holding 9, ideally getting a high volume bounce away from 9, finally getting some distance in between the stock price and 9. We can look to use 9 as kind of that trampoline to start pushing toward those next levels, which, realistically, guys, let's be honest, it's all-time highs, $1,000 a share. There's really nothing in between here and there. So I want to see $900 a share hold if I'm looking at this with a bullish perspective. Now, you bears, for you guys, a downside break through 9 hard on high volume. And then ideally backtesting 9 on lower volume and rejecting hard on as much as possible. What does that tell you? Well, that tells you pretty definitively that we got a high volume break. A lot of people betting on that break. Or selling and FOMOing in short on that break. Low volume, low sample size betting on the break back above 9. And then rejecting a similar high sample size on big volume. Betting on a rejection off of 9 and FOMOing in short and selling. Okay? That would be great for you guys. That could then set you guys up to head down toward the bottom of that channel, which is 850. But don't forget, currently right around 870, 870.50, that 50-day moving average is kind of waiting in the shadows. So that's another potential area of support that you bears would have to face, not too long after cracking back down beneath 9. So just watch out for that. Now, implied volatility here, if we compare this to the last couple of months, it's still kind of, if let's get a little more sample size here. Compared to the last four or so months, it's in the mid to high range. Okay, if you compare to only the last month, it is in the higher range. All right, even the last month and a half or so, it's high. So remember, it's important to understand where IV lies in relation to your intended trade time frame. Okay, especially when you're looking to open a new position, because you have to understand that you're paying for the Vega value up front, whether it's very high or very low. You want to pay for as little as possible and sell and claiming as much as possible, ideally, in terms of Vega value. Okay, that's the volatility side of an options bet, which is very important. And speaking of that, let's take a look here at the expected move, updated information here today. The next expiration we have on Nvidia is Friday, of course, May 10th. The expected move by Friday's close compared to today's close is plus or minus $32.52 per share. What we can do, again, divide that by 3, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? And then we add back 50% to make up for the fact that that first number assumes 3 green days or 3 red days in a row. Once we're done doing that, that leaves us with a plus or minus expected move by tomorrow, Wednesday's close, of $16.26 per share. Now you're thinking, okay, that's the volatility expectation. That's good to know for my options trade, or even just a shares trade. But especially important for options. But what about what about directional bias? Well, for that we look at volume, right? A little over 1.2 million total contracts traded on Nvidia here today. And look at this. We have 736,000 calls, 508,000 puts. So call side bullish bias there on the overall. Now, if we look here at the short-term speculators, right, the 0 to 20 delta range, 263,000 calls, 234,000 puts. So it's small, but a slight bullish bias out of the short-term speculators as well. Listen, guys, if your goal is with this whole trading thing is to try to expedite the process, that's what I made the private server, the private community for. I built that, I started it, I should say, a little over 3 years ago now, the very beginning of 2021. The alerts are going out every single day. Scalp setups, unusual options activity. I work with my platinum one-on-one students every day. You guys can join that at that link in the pinned comment. And hey, by the way, if you're getting value out of these daily NVIDIA uploads, one thing I ask, it's free, 100% free. Takes half a second, leave a like on the video, and then get out of here and enjoy your day. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.